Hello. Is my sound? Hang on. Let me just check my sound. Let me just check the things. There we go. I think we're good. Hang on. Let me just turn my mic down just a smidge. What happened last time? I've still got to adjust some sound stuff because I have been physically moving everything around, and obviously because I've got a shotgun microphone. As soon as you move it up or down or whatever, the volume changes. So I apologise if it was peaking out, and but for those who I did have a comment about yelling. I find that the yelling actually works for comedic effect. I think it's just a levels problem. So bear with me, be patient. I said no. I was being a smartass. I apologise, but I do actually listen to these things. But at the same time, I'm not paid to do this stuff. I've got a few very generous people who, are patrons, and that's going to be going to be interesting. It's very much related to the topic at hand today. Which is, sort of declaring where your money is coming from and seeing where your money, sorry about that, declaring where, who funds certain media and, influencers is I think the fun's over. If you're a dodgy person, the fun's over. If you've done the right thing, you have nothing really to worry about, I don't think. I think it's just one of those things where, we'll talk about it. And I've got a few, very generous and very kind patrons, but, obviously, as much as I do like the, generous and large amounts, I prefer small amounts with more people. I mean, that's more of a buffer, because if anything happens to any one patron or, anything happens to my husband, who largely funds this stuff with his salary, I can't keep going. So, anything helps, and I would appreciate your support. And I understand that everyone's got, the problem is I'm too aware of the situation. I don't want people to feel like they have to give me money. Don't want people to feel guilty if they have to withdraw that money, because, things are really expensive. Our financial situation has changed as well. There's not a lot of money in, this type of analysis in a lot of the rewards and incentives and everything that basically everything that we were promised about the internet was bullshit. But I just want to first of all express appreciation for those that have been patrons, and I because I haven't been posting on Patreon, I haven't really been writing. I've been kind of reactive. A lot of it has been because I've done just so much work trying to find the right angle to persuade people that this stuff's even going on. Like, I've been gaslit for so many years over this stuff, where I'm like, well, if we don't plug these holes and create any kind of accountability or mechanism for bad actors to, manipulate platforms or game the system, there's no real recourse. Those that do it are sort of attacked by bots. At least now, I'm feeling like there might be a way forward for people like me who, at least now, if I'm being attacked by bad faith bots or being attacked by various people, or, there's some recourse. I feel like it's maybe closing in a little bit where, obviously America is going to Americate, right? America exists as the Wild West that everybody else learns from, okay? America's the control. America's the Petri dish that we, perform, that they do the sort of experimental shit. And we all sort of take away from sort of their ability to take, risks and, do dodgy shit and all of that sort of stuff. And we just sort of maybe synthesize a lot of that stuff and learnings into, actionable, reasonable policy. That's what, Australia has largely been sort of designed on or developed on. And, I feel like maybe if we just hang on a little bit, if I just hang on just this little bit longer, I may have some recourse. A lot of these problems with algorithms, the problems with tech, problems with sort of, dodgy influence is that there's been no real policy framework. There's been every incentive to do the wrong thing, no punishment for doing the wrong thing, no scrutiny, and basically anybody with, the biggest wallet can run roughshod over everyone's information, everyone's experience. And, that's going to be a race to the bottom, and it has been for some time. And the thing that I'm really grateful for at the moment is that I sort of hung in there. And you'll see today, like this landed in my feed today. Matt, hello, it's a party today. So it's a vindication party a little bit now we have, I think it's the beginning of good things where we can maybe reclaim the internet. Okay. I'm hopeful. I'm always optimistic. I don't know how much optimism I've got left. I'm running on fumes, but I try to be optimistic. Okay. It's the thing that you have to slipping into nihilism and thinking that we're sliding into some sort of tech dystopia. Like with my last stream, I'm not sure, how many people have had a chance to watch the replay. Oh, yes, related. Sorry. I am going to start doing clips. I'm recording this today, and I'm going to cut it up and I'm going to try and cut up the other one as well. Again, I'm just stretched too thinly. I'm doing the best I can with what I have. And social, it really is. It's very interesting and exciting. But what I find really interesting is that a lot of the pressure is that the world is just saying enough. I think for a lot of Americans that are watching, they're sort of not really aware of just how powerful, influential, dominating the US sort of, hegemon. Okay, there's a fancy word of politics, but how the hegemon has sort of dictated how people interact with the internet. They've dictated the news, they've dictated policy. We've sort of been on the back foot. We've been at the mercy of, lax rules in America in terms of tech policy. And a lot of the sort of superficial debates, say it, don't spray it, Tara. Superficial debates, right? Oh, Section 230. Well, that's not quite simple. It's a very extraordinarily simplistic view and I'm going to show you a little bit of how complex the landscape actually is when you're a good faith policy person. Just a little bit. I'm not going to go too much into it, but I think it just, again, helps you to pause, understand that, okay, I don't expect people to know these things because these things take years of experience and training. This is something that I know an awful lot about. Whatever my job title would be, let's just call me a technologist. When I was on the news, they called me a social media expert, which cracked me up. Troll-a-lol. But, broadly technologist, political scientist, and a user experience person. That's sort of where I fit. And I have done this for 30 years, and even I, you can't be across the details of this, especially global, okay? So Peter, if you sit down for 2 seconds, you'll actually listen and hear and, we'll get there. The ACCC is the regulatory body for corporations and corporate regulations in Australia. Okay, so the responsibility of the ACCC is the anti-corruption consumer. What does it stand for? I've forgotten. Oh, here we go. The Australian Competition Regulator. That's what they are. Competition and Consumer Commission. So we'll get there. Okay. Now. So what I'm seeing is a shift. So I think a lot of us were waiting for the US government to sort of, do Section 230 reform, whatever, like that's going to fix anything that's actually, okay. So Peter gets a mute for a minute. Just don't heckle me on my stream. Time out, because it's distracting. So please, can I just say, I've said this before, but just as a general tip, coming in and heckling a person on their chat and asking questions of somebody who's trying to speak about complex issues live, it's really irritating. Okay? I think you need to get your mindset in check, which is, you're not, just because it's there doesn't mean you have to use it. And I have my own sort of, so, calm down, Peter. We'll get there, okay? Yes, okay, we'll get there. Don't heckle people while they're live streaming, okay? Otherwise, I just ignore it. So I put you in a mute so I don't have to see it, because the chat's meant to be there to just sort of interact, not heckle the person. So, and derail people. So I'm just going to ask that as a courtesy to not do that. It starts with people behaving better online. It's not just, like this is, again, it's very much linked to the topic that I'm talking about today. Expert Peter decides he's got something to say before we've even started because, it's dudes on the internet. However, and I'm sure he's got a lot of expertise in the issue as well. I'm sure he's got a lot to offer the conversation. Because, they always do. Always do. Everyone knows everything. So anyway, hi, Matt. But yeah, if the chat does get annoying, then I just turn it off. Okay. Okay, so I was very rude to Peter. There's no need to be sexist. Yeah, that's what it is. Okay. All right, so I'm going to hide the chat window because because people can't play nice. And this is very much linked to the topic that we're talking about today. Looks like the algorithm likes Taya again. So, okay. This is the flip side of not being punished by the algorithm all of a sudden, is that we get live ones in the chat. So anyway, interact amongst yourselves. I'm not going to see it. Okay. So it's linked to this, which is that anyone, there we go. Actually, you know what? Put user in timeout too. Let's have some fun with that. I'm a very mean person for asserting boundaries and telling people that just because there's a box, a big part of the reason why, the internet is where it is today is because of this mentality that just because it's available to you and just because someone, it's something that is made available to you through, the generosity and hard work of others. And that just because someone shows up on a live stream and they are, trying to talk to their audience, that you are somehow entitled to come and wave your dick in their face. That's not the case, okay? In public, it's like walking up to somebody who's having a conversation in public and just punching them in the face, or, there's rules around that too, okay? And that's what's happening. Over time, the internet is slowly being declared a public space, and there's rules around how you conduct yourself in public. You just look like you've got no manners at this point, okay? So, with all due respect, I am requesting once more that people treat the internet and treat these things as the gift they are and the good faith that they are. This is free. I do this for free. If you want to become a patron and heckle me on my chats, you are most welcome to, okay? Eventually, the chat window will only be available to people who give me money anyway. But I want you to know that you don't have the right to do these things. It's closing in on you. You had fun. You had fun. You fucked it. And this is where we are. And it's linked to very much the topic at hand today. So, hello. So the Australian Consumer Commission, that thing, Competition and Consumer Commission. Okay, it's a bit of a mouthful. They threw me. Basically, they've sort of released this press release today. I saw it through Mumbrella. This is an Australian ad industry thing, but Australia is very much a very good test of sort of reasonable, policy, complex policy, Australian policy. The way that our systems are structured, and it's like this in America, despite the mouth breathers and Canada, despite mouth breathers actually, thinking that things are simple and they've never actually done anything in their lives. They've got a lot of opinions on it, but they don't actually do the work, which is that a big part of the way that, this balance of power, it's not just about, church and state or keeping, legislature, judiciary and executive separate. It's also in terms of policy, the way that Australian laws work is that there's no one law that regulates things. What you've got is a lot of different, I'd actually argue that this keeps things more stable, okay? Keeps things more robust because there's no one department that is in charge of certain areas, policy-wise. A lot of it is that You've got policy sort of in Department A, policy in Department B. You've got cross-department committees that actually sort of negotiate and sort of work in various committees and task forces and that sort of thing. And so one of the problems with political advertising, so we've had a problem like during this was, I mean, it's always been a problem, but we have a heavy regulated advertising space when it comes to political advertising. Okay. And so, you know, before the internet, you sort of had, you know, everything has to be done sort of through, you have to declare who's paid for the ad, who wrote the ad. You know, every person who does political advertising during a election campaign, or, you know, even it's obviously more strict during an election campaign, but in any sort of political advertising, you cannot actually run political advertising without, you know, knowing where it came from, the money. We don't have, I mean, again, there's always ways around these things, but this is, you know, largely how it works, which is that, you know, corporate donations, you know, are capped. They are generally pretty open. Like this actually is theoretically how it works in the United States. It's just that these networks of dark money and you know, foundations and political action committees and all of those sorts of things make it corruptible and make it open to lots and lots of sort of, you know, lack of transparency around, you know, political donations. That happens here too. It's not, you know, it's, but for the most part, the thinking with a lot of these policy issues is that, is basically to keep elections, you know, as incorruptible as they can possibly be. Now, the internet obviously provided a trigger for a lot of these. Again, none of this is new. We've talked about yellow journalism before. We've talked about with the printing press, you know, you had a bunch of people had access to the printing press, a bunch of bullshit got printed, a bunch of corruption, a bunch of lies, a bunch of sensation, all that sort of stuff. It's called yellow journalism. Look it up. And that sort of paved the way for, you know, the current journalism standards. That stutters coming out. You know, that paved the way for, they decided there needed to be some rules and there needed to be some structure, and then there needed to be some standards around advertising and those sorts of things like that. And this has all happened before. Now, the internet is like the printing press, where there was this new, you know, it's widened up access. It's given people access to these tools, and they're going to fuck it. That's what people do. People fuck things, much like the guys in this chat, who think that it's okay to just come in and just enter a stream. And, you know, if you've got something to say about tech policy, or you've got something to say about Canadian tech policy, or you've got something to say, then why don't you set up your stream and you can show that to your audience? I might even watch it. I might even push people in your direction if I think it complements what I'm saying. Okay. Now, streaming live is a lot of work. It's a lot of different parts, a lot of things that, you know, it's hard even when you're not thinking. When you are just performing and you know what you're saying and you are scripted, it's hard. When you are doing something where you're not media trained and you actually have to engage with quite dense material, you know, it's not easy. So showing up, I'm not the rude one in these instances, okay? You are, because you've shown up and you've started, you're abusing this thing that's intended to be a good faith thing that you get for free. So you're the wrecker. You're a wrecker, and that's the rude thing, okay? And so, you know, just contemplate that. Learn some manners, okay? I know your mothers didn't raise you very well, but, you know, that's not my problem. Okay, so... Of course, so Matt said, of course you hear about scammy advertisers telling influencers not to tell people it's an ad. Well, this is a lot of, yeah. Okay, so we'll get to that. So, so this landed today, and like off the back of what I was talking about with my last stream about how the IAB chief came out and started to call everybody who, you know, is anti big tech, okay? Again, that's a complicated and loaded term, but calling everybody who has an issue with privacy or, you know, including Apple extremists, we're starting to see that sort of getting a bit desperate, right? And starting that MO over and over again of accusing any critic of, you know, whatever, okay? It's done, it's tired. And a lot of this stuff worked. I think people underestimate the role that Twitter played in sort of astroturfing and, the sort of ground zero of these types of problems, right? So I've talked about this, like, again, there's years of content on this. So for me, it's kind of a vindication day because these things are slowly and, well, like very quickly, actually. They've taken a long time, but they're going bang, 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 bang with policy and pushback and regulation, and it's all just closing in on tech at the moment. And, right-wingers will turn around and, make it about big tech, blah, 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 but it's actually more about, corporate interests. Okay. Okay, where are we? So this landed in my feed today, and again, where are we? Don't hit the go hang up button, Taya. I think it's this one. No, it's this one. There we go. Okay, so this is Mumbrella. Mumbrella is the sort of main advertising industry publication in Australia. So it's like the kind of it's quite an influential place, and I'll take you to the official, but I'll walk you through. This is what actually I saw this morning. Okay, so the Australian Competition Regulator has begun the sweep to identify misleading testimonials and endorsements by social media influencers based on over 150 tip-offs. Following its Facebook post last week seeking community feedback, the Australian Competition and Consumer Commission, ACCC, said it has started investigating potential advertising misconduct of more than 100 social media influencers. So have you seen an influencer that isn't disclosing their posts or ads? Influencers across all social media platforms can't mislead consumers. Oops, hang on, that's all right. Let's bring it back. Let's open her up. There we go. So influencers across all social media platforms can't mislead consumers by failing to disclose if a post is an ad, a sponsorship, or if they're receiving incentives for promoting a brand. Send us a DM if you think you've spotted an influencer doing the wrong thing. Hashtag this is not an ad. Hashtag not sponsored. So this is really fascinating because this actually strikes to the heart of a lot of the issues that I've been talking about with influencer campaigns for political purposes. So, a lot of these far right and, neoliberal left, centre right and right, there's no left wing in America, political operatives that are doing dark campaigns that, where the money's shady, where they pretend that they are, again, they're basically astroturfing an entire campaign, bots, influencers, celebrities, all of that sort of stuff with no declaration of, who's paying for it, where it's coming from. So this is actually like going to absolutely nuke certain publications like the Daily Wire. Like if this was coming out in America, again, we're hypothesizing, but, this is where idiots who come onto my chat don't understand that laws in Australia, because we're considered and respected throughout the world, okay, regardless of you fools not knowing anything that's going on, it's called the thing called non-binding precedent in law, okay? Because Australia and Canada are in the Commonwealth, Canada actually pays attention. Canadian policies actually, Canadian policy people pay attention to what's happening elsewhere, like Australia. Like with Bill C-16, Australia paid attention to what was happening in Canada and vice versa. America pays attention to the rest of the world. Well, they don't. They pretend to, and then they just do whatever America does. Okay, correction. The rest of the world pays attention to what America does and learns from it. That's how this all works, okay? That's how policy and law works. It doesn't happen in a vacuum. So when there is a big policy push against these things in a Commonwealth or Western country, guess what? The rest of the policy crew pay attention and it becomes, influential. Like when the GDPR passed in Europe, okay, when the GDPR was implemented, the first thing that the Australian government looked at was, do we have the GDPR? Do we need to implement the GDPR here? Guess what, fellas, geniuses, we're also signatories to international law, which means that if we commit to certain provisions at the international law level, we have committed to doing the same legislation across and implementing it in our countries, which is how you get uniformity around things like copyright law, the DMCA, all of these sorts of things, okay? Why does fucking God, these people? I'm rude and sexist, didn't you know? No, you're an idiot. So, how's their time out going? I hope they've left. So, anyway, but you know, I enjoy this Getting a Live one because I like an opportunity to give teachable moments on you know, policy and stuff, right? So, no, teachable moment. So, I'm very rude. How rude. It's so rude of women to set boundaries and say no to men. How dare we do such things? Show some respect while I wave my dick in your face before you've even started your stream. God, these guys. Fucking hell. The entitlement. And this is just, you know, it just, oh my God. Oh yeah. So I was going to start my cop outfit. I got my props. Hang on. I was going to start, but then I fucked up and then I got rattled. Hello. 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 We got an influencer who's bullshit. Hello. Hello, Breitbart. You're fucked. This is what I've been talking about. People who don't disclose where the money's coming from and they're sharing information, making it look organic, and doing it with bots and astroturfing and, you know, various other things, okay? They literally hire people who want to be actors, put them up, elevate them, train them up to be YouTubers, and then they run and prop up those YouTube channels. Matt Binder is an actor. Look up his CV, okay? So anyway, so it's like, okay, let me get a word out, dickhead. Who cares? Okay, so, where are we? Okay, where was I up to? Oh, yes, I was reading that. So the watchdog will determine whether these personalities have failed to disclose their affiliation with a product or company they're promoting. Most of these involved were in the beauty, lifestyle, parenting, and fashion categories, as it will, where influencer marketing is prevalent. ACCC Chair Gina Cass-Gottlieb said the number of tip-offs reflects the community concern about the ever-increasing number of manipulative marketing techniques on social media designed to exploit or pressure consumers into purchasing goods and services. This is incredible. No, my lip's not bleeding, fuckhead. I've got a birthmark. Okay, that was actually, you know what, ban. All right. Block. Peter loses his chat privileges. So, they don't learn. The timeout is a chance to learn and then you get your ban. So, no, I've got a birthmark. That's my lips. So, okay. It's called a Venus mound, which is funny. It's called a Venus mound. I'm like, I got two Venus mounds. So, okay. So already we are hearing some law firms and industry bodies have informed their clients about the ACCC sweep and reminded them of their advertising disclosure requirements. So a sweep is obviously something where they've decided to focus on one particular thing. Like, I don't know if that's a word anywhere else. So platforms subjected to scrutinization include, dickhead, here we go. Let's go back. So platforms subjected to scrutinization include Facebook, Instagram, Snapchat, TikTok, Twitch, and YouTube. On top of monitoring behaviours from influencers with varied follower numbers, the ACCC will investigate the role of other parties such as advertisers, marketers, brands, and social media platforms in facilitating misconduct. Cass Gottlieb said the ACCC will not hesitate to take action where we see consumers are at risk of being misled or deceived by a testimonial and there is potential for significant harm. Thank you, BioThreat. We're good. So, yeah, sorry, I needed to make sure that it's just because a lot of what I do, first of all, being live, I'm not media trained. I do try to actually engage with the chats. So what I do is I sometimes, you get a live one, they roll in, you got to make an example of them. You give them a timeout, you assert yourself. I'm just trying to make things a bit better and a bit more pleasant. I swear to God, we're good people here. We have fun, but like I do. When people are being fuckheads on a chat, I can't engage with the chat. And I want to make it, there's a balance where it's like, I want to make you feel welcome. So I just wanted to explain my reasoning there, okay? So if people like that are going to, it's just, conduct yourselves better. Be different. You know, you don't have to be this guy. I'm writing that book chapter at the moment about that guy, okay? Peter today was that guy, okay? Now, Peter can message me or tweet me or whatever and apologise and I'll unblock him. But for now, he's got to behave. So, I'll buy a threat. Okay, Singapore. Okay, cool. So let's get back. So I'll go back to reading the article because this is actually really, really significant. And the way that this operates is that, Australia is actually, contrary to, the people who are affected by these laws, people who, spread bullshit, take dark money, running dodgy agencies that, that where they don't declare their interest, they don't declare who's funding their content. Those people aren't, they're the ones that claimed Australia's fallen, despite every metric to the contrary, every fact to the contrary. You can't argue with people who have made up their mind. You just can't. But I'm going to talk to people who are open-minded. But this is significant because influencer campaigns are a large part of a lot of bullshit online, like not just ads. They've focused obviously on, brands and, the health community and, health influencers and that sort of stuff. That's a good thing. But, this is coming down the pipe for other like political advertising as well. And I'll explain why in a minute. So this action may include following up misconduct with compliance, education, and potential enforcement activities as appropriate. Now, I will address one of the comments I got this morning, okay, on this, which is that it can be a toothless tiger because, obviously they much like the ACCC and the taxation office and those sorts of government departments. Obviously, they're so overloaded. This is no different to the IRS or other taxation. Any government department that is in the business of enforcement, they've got way more cases than they do, resources to fight those cases. So they're going to have to be a bit more strategic, and they're probably going to, go after the sort of mid-level little guys that sort of are sloppy, not the sophisticated outfits that know how to lie, like say, these organised disinformation media companies, like say, for example, the Daily Wire or Rebel News. They're not exactly going to take Murdoch down here, as much as I would love that, but you never know, they might. Okay, so what it does is it provides a framework, a legal framework and recourse for people to complain, for people to initiate proceedings, that gives them a mandate to initiate proceedings, okay? That's where the gap was, which is that if there's no law in Australia, if there is no law, they can't charge you with anything. That's how it operates. We operate on freedom by default, and if it's illegal, then it's illegal. That's how Australia, our law is designed, which is basically, until there's an actual law, you're free, okay? This is what Americans don't get. We don't need to prescribe our laws because that's how it operates. So now, because we've had a gap where there's been no legal angle or avenue, I'll just go through this article quickly and then I'll come back. So the crackdown comes as ACCC continues to investigate the provision of social media services in Australia, including sponsored post and influencer advertising in its digital platform service inquiry. So this has been going on for some years, and it's constantly ongoing. It's a lot of work, and it's But there's another interim report. So the basic, I'll show you this in a minute. So. This is how complicated this is, okay? Not just reform Section 230 now. It's not that simple, okay? Anyone who's sort of talking about these things as though they're simple, really doesn't know what they're talking about. So AANA, the self-regulatory body of the advertising industry, updated its Code of Ethics and Practice in 2021. And I've been, working a little bit behind the scenes to put pressure on people for that, like building relationships and stuff. But I haven't had a, direct hand in any of this. I've just been... But, this is such a relief. So enforced by ad standards, the updated code has similar requirements that advertising and marketing should be clearly distinguishable and marked with hashtags, #ad, #advert, or #paid partnership. The latest cases upheld under the code include a Shine and Global Ballooning ad where an influencer failed to disclose being gifted 2 tickets for a hot air balloon experience. So, obviously they're going to go after the little influencers, more. But a lot of that is because... these things have a way of having a slight chilling effect. It's unfortunate, but it's just the way that these resources work, right? So that's what happened. So here, So the ACCC. So this is the ACCC social media sweep targets influencers. The ACCC has this week started a sweep to identify misleading testimonials and endorsements by social media influencers. It'll also look at more than 100 influencers mentioned in over 150 tip-offs from consumers. And this is the thing that is worth commenting on. Okay, so the way that these things work. So these are they're government departments, okay, or commissions, and basically they act on sort of reports. So complaints, reports. Like I said, tip-offs, okay? So what has happened is, like, if you've got a privacy complaint, you need to sort of first go to, like, I started to initiate a privacy complaint with Twitter to try and get information on what they have on me, and because that's right, I was talking about the GDPR. So when the GDPR came out, was implemented, we had a conversation about whether we should implement a GDPR, and much like all Australian law, the way that Australian law operates is that it is usually a combination of different policies cobbled together and laws. We don't have one statute for many things. A lot of it is within different delegations for different responsibilities across departments. And once you actually do look at the different acts, so in Australia's case, it's the Corporations Act, the Privacy Act. I can't remember. There's a few different acts and policies. We actually do, in effect, already have a GDPR-like framework in place. Okay, so we don't need to have a law. Australia. See, the funny thing about Australia is that we tend to avoid paperwork. Just our thing. We don't need to do it unless there is really an absurdity in law or case law has gotten away. There's really not a whole lot of need to legislate unless you need to. A lot of our stuff is run by bureaucracy. Now, you can drag that up into big government arguments or whatever, but again, that's a distraction but it operates. It keeps things fairly stable. And also, don't forget that when you've got different departments running parts of it and then working together, first of all, you get better specialised knowledge in the area. So obviously, the Australian Competition and Consumer Commission, they are specialist in corruption, anti-competitive stuff, all that sort of stuff. We've also, not corruption. Up until the Corruption Commission, it was sort of within the ACCC, but now we've got a new corruption. Right, we've actually got an anti-corruption commission now that's cracking down on these things, because that's something that the left in Australia have been pushing for some time because of our corrupt governments. But anyway, so with political advertising in Australia, how it worked and where the gap was this was one of the problems. It's always been there, but during the gay marriage referendum, the fucking whatever it was, I can't remember. Whatever it was when we fucking voted, I can't fucking remember. My words aren't working. But during the gay marriage debate, there was a lot of disinformation coming from people who were sort of dropping brochures and dodgy stuff during the election to letterboxes claiming falsehoods, a lot of hate speech, that sort of stuff. Okay, it wasn't just a matter of opinion and an argument for no, it was actually just misleading. Okay, we've also had the problem of your Breitbart style advertising and those sort of disinformation funnels in the form of Clive Palmer, who is a billionaire here, who has basically decided to, he's just unlimited money, he just posts whatever bullshit, the usual sort of right-wing bullshit that, has it's sort of been a problem in election campaigning. And the problem with the way that Australian law works in practice is that the AEC doesn't police truth. Okay, so you've got the Electoral Commission, who their only job is to make sure that the elections run smoothly, that there is open and fair campaigns, that it is corrupt. That people who are running for office have gone through a certain process. That sort of stuff, making sure that there's integrity in that election. Then you've got the Competition and Consumer Commission, okay, which is, like I said, they are sort of more about consumers, and that's where sort of misleading conduct those sorts of things come into play. Then you've got ACMA, which is the regulatory body for advertising. I think what a lot of people won't realise is that ACMA is actually the biggest reason for a lot of these tech policies. And when you want to advertise on YouTube or on social media, if you want to monetize, you are at the mercy of advertising guidelines. It's actually advertising law that actually limits a lot of these things, because you have to conduct yourself in a certain manner if you're on the airwaves. That's just one of those things, right? Covering my head. Let me move my window up. Hang on. Let me move my head above the chat. Hang on. Where are we? Let me just move myself. Hello, I'm here. Hello. Hello. Okay, so, I'll look at the chat after. The ACCC can't force people to get thin, no. So basically, the way that Australian law operates, and I find that it makes for us, again, I'm obviously biased because I studied the Australian system. A big part of my studies and my dissertation and my mini thesis. My dissertation was something else, but my mini thesis in my final year was actually comparative, law with Australia and the United States. So I know a lot about that sort of comparative stuff. And one of the key differences with Australia is that we are relatively more stable as a result of these sort of checks and balances, because of whereas America sort of has this it's robust to a point, but there's an instability in the United States legal system that doesn't really exist here, mostly because you don't have veto and, and obviously the money and stuff involved. But the way that it operates with, the Electoral Commission in Australia also, you can't take donations you have to declare any donation over, I think it's 1,500. Don't quote me on that. I think it's changed. I think some of those things have changed, but you can't do a private donation to a political party over X amount without having to be on the public record. Okay. And it's the same thing with being open, who pays tax and who doesn't. A lot of these things are public record, and that puts sort of social pressure. But what the AEC does is determine, you get a payment based on your percentage of vote, and that funds your next campaign. So that's something where so depending on how much of the vote you get, you sort of get reimbursed as a candidate for running in the campaign and being participant in democracy. And, it's a better system in overall. Now, again, there's always dark money. There's always, something like Clive Palmer and the United Australia Party sort of came in and he sort of, threw his money around, right? Threw his money around and started these sort of dark campaigns that sort of skirted around all of these laws and hid in the gaps. So what you need to understand is that political advertising in particular hides in between the cracks. And that crack was determined sort of, about it's been a long time, but it really came to a head with Palmer's party. Okay. And, obviously COVID as well. So what we had in COVID was people who were dropping leaflet dropping in letterboxes. Okay. And there's no real recourse for this because it is actually advertising. And this is where there's been no way to enforce this, which was that you had people putting, full-on QAnon bullshit, like crazy learn the truth stuff with a QR code, the craziest shit into letterboxes. And they did this with the gay marriage debate as well, sort of fear-mongering, just getting people to leaflet drop. And you can't actually do anything because people are allowed to drop leaflets, and it sort of it fell in the cracks. Okay. And the same thing happens. So we can agree that Pete Evans is another big problem. And also, obviously, with the health community, that's, that sort of vegan, those health community to Q pipeline is a real one. It is established. It's pretty crazy. So, but also with political advertising, this is the thing that I've been tracking for so long, is these sort of undeclared influencer campaigns that we know are being funded by certain political parties, political interests, but they make it look organic. They make it look like their commentary is commentary rather than an ad or whatever. And, like this, obviously this can still, see, the thing is that, like, because I don't take these things, okay? I mean, I've never been offered because I say what I want to say, but at the same time, I have noticed that there's a way to game this system, which is to be sort of love bombed with Patreon, okay? Which is that, if you want to nudge an influencer in a certain direction, and that influencer is going to sort of, be afraid. I'm not afraid to tell Matt to fuck off, even though Matt's a patron, and he would respect me for it, right? Not that he's ever given me any reason to, but, I've had this with other patrons where they think that they can give me a bit of, money and somehow change my ideas. And like there's a lot of influencers who will. And especially when you're talking in like high volume, right? And you don't have that personal relationship with your audience. I've talked about this with some of my previous videos, but it's pretty clear that there is a way to, first of all, do it with the influencer's knowledge. Okay, so if the first one, this is what they're going after, which is, the influencer with their knowledge, then they're not declaring that it's an ad that they've taken money or favors or whatever in exchange for this message. But then you've got the ones that are done without their knowledge. Now, so let's get back to this. So the ACCC has started a sweep to identify misleading testimonials and endorsements by social media influencers. It will also look at more than 100 influencers mentioned, blah, blah, blah. Most of the tip-offs from members of the public were about influencers in beauty and lifestyle. The number of tip-offs reflects the community concern about the ever-increasing number of manipulative marketing techniques on social media, designed to exploit or pressure consumers into purchasing goods or services. We want to thank the community for letting us know which influencers they believe which might not be doing the right thing. Already, we're hearing some law firms and industry bodies have informed their clients about the ACCC's sweep. They're running scared, okay? And what I find funny is that I remember I was talked out of finishing my law degree. I was here in Perth and I was talking to, because I was just going to qualify as a lawyer, because I see all of these things coming down the pipe, these legal issues. And he goes, what are you going to do that for? Why would you do that for? There's no issue. Like, they'll sort it out. And I said, no, you don't understand. Like, this is going to be the big frontier for law. And I wish that I'd pushed through and qualified, because these battles are not even close to being won. So I'm thinking of sort of doing, anyway. But that's okay. I know enough. I'm still qualified in legal studies and all those things. I'm still qualified. So, but we'll see how we go. I might end up finishing my legal training so that I can at least represent. But, there's ways to do that without having to, whatever, think about it. So, but they've known about this for some time, but I've been warning about this for years. This is the thing that made me quit, which was that I said, you guys are not being honest. I can't compete in this space. If the industry doesn't actually sort of, get their shit together and start addressing these loopholes and make it so that people are, held to account when they don't actually declare that they're taking money or who funds them, or, they need to be subjecting themselves to an audit, then the industry is going to be erased at the bottom. People are going to be like I've been talking about before with these like radicalization funnels, and people, this is very much linked to the Twitter files and very much linked to people who have a lot of ad dollars. They've got the relationships. They can make anything true with enough, plant a few influencers, plant the story, throw bots at it. This is like striking it right and hitting it right in the nuts. All right. If there's men watching, that would be painful or kinky. Subscribe to my OnlyFans. My son suggested that I have a patron tier that's basically pay me $100 a month for me to not set up an OnlyFans. God, he's funny. And then send links, send nudes to everyone who's not a patron. Nobody wants to see me strip. I swear to God. Oh my God, nobody wants it. Seriously, like I lost a bunch of weight, and then I've got sort of the bingo wings, and it's not good. It's not pretty. You don't want to see that. Where are we? So the sweep is being run over the coming weeks as part of the ACCC's compliance and enforcement priorities for 2022-23, with the broad aim of identifying deceptive marketing practices across the digital economy. Thank Thank heavens for this. This is the thing I've been begging for, and I'll tell you why. Yeah, you don't want to see, trust me, you really don't. So the sweep is being run, where are you? So as part of the sweep, the ACCC team is reviewing a range of social media platforms, including Instagram, TikTok, Snapchat, YouTube, and Facebook, and live streaming. Where am I? Live streaming service Twitch. Oh, here we go. This is it. This is absolutely amazing. I'm so excited about this. Now, Twitch. The sweep is targeting sectors where influencer marketing is particularly widespread, including fashion, beauty and cosmetics, food and beverage, travel, health, fitness and well-being, parenting, gaming, and technology. So this is crypto. This is amazing. Now, it's interesting they haven't mentioned political advertising, but that will by proxy. This is the angle for me. Okay. So in conducting the sweep, the ACCC is also considering the role of other parties such as advertisers, marketers, brands, and social media platforms in facilitating misconduct. Hallelujah! Thank you. Yes. Subject these black boxes to audits. Audit their fucking books and where their money's coming from if there's a complaint based on complaints. This is amazing. People have no idea because I've been talking about this for a while now. They're going to be audited, right? And this, again, is only in Australia. But what happens in Australia often sort of happens in other nations. They try in America and fail, but America's going to Americate. But also a lot of these things, and in defense of the tech companies, okay, a lot of the tech companies are generally good faith with this stuff, and they do want sensible guidelines. They do want ethical practices. And I love the fact that they're being forced to do this. I've been trying to pitch this for so long to everyone that I know, that you need to look at the agencies. They need to be, but there was no law. There was no policy. There was no way. You can't, this is a fundamental misunderstanding of how the law works for most people, which is that you can't charge people with a crime unless there's a law. You can't audit people unless they have mandate to do so. And now they have mandate. And that's amazing. And of course, the people, see, this is where you should watch the right-wing media sphere right now, the ecosystem. Watch Murdoch go to war with this policy. And watch, I would imagine that, the Daily Wire and that mob will run with this and make it into authoritarian Australian fighting free speech. The Australian government is clamping down on our right to sell products and services. And what they will do, much like the speech that I made fun of in my last stream, they will say, this will hurt the little guy. This will hurt the little guy, but they will be lying about the fact that, Ben Shapiro, these guys absolutely are in the crosshairs. You won't be able to run that kind of outfit in Australia without being in big amounts of trouble, especially if I'm the one who's making complaints. That's the thing. Good luck with your bots from now on, folks. So, that I've been subjected to a lot of these bots and stuff, over the years for talking about these issues and these tactics, but now I can actually show that I'm doing this work, that I am correct, and I'm just so fucking relieved. I actually choked up and got teary over it because it's just been such a long stretch of screaming about this. And everyone in the industry will go, yeah, that's obvious in hindsight, but it's not that obvious. And because I know that I have been pushing for this for... Gosh, I've been pushing hard for 5 years. I've been pushing my whole career, but particularly hard on this for 5 years. And very few people have been interested in implementing this. They've gone, what are you going to do? And then they learn the tactics and use them themselves. So this is really great news for ethical, truly human-centered technology people, okay? This is amazing. It's just incredible. If America can pull it together for 2 seconds to be able to do this, which I don't think they will, but it would be good. If they have a body that does the same thing. But, Canada probably will. But I'm sure that they'll call it authoritarian or some sort of, fascist thing or whatever the fuck they do. But this is just good policy, and it's policy that I've been screaming for forever. But they'll call me an authoritarian. That's a little bit rude. Wanting things to be sensible and stable and secure and true, you're just rude. What are you, an extremist? Tim Cook. So with more Australians choosing to shop online, consumers often rely on reviews and testimonials when making purchases, but misleading endorsements can be very harmful. It's important social media influencers are clear if there are any commercial motivations behind their posts. This includes those posts that are incentivized and presented as impartial but are not. The ACCC will not hesitate to take action where we see consumers are at risk of being misled or deceived by a testimonial and there is potential for significant harm. Thank fuck for that. Woo-hoo! Woo-hoo! Woo-hoo!
Uh-oh, retard alert.
It's over. Got myself on. So it's, where are we? The action may include following up misconduct with compliance, education, potential enforcement activities as appropriate. So that's good. So many consumers are aware that influencers receive a financial benefit for promoting products and services. However, the ACCC remains concerned that influencers, advertisers and brands try to hide this fact from consumers, which prevents them from making informed choices. This can particularly apply to micro-influencers with smaller followings, as they can build and maintain a more seemingly authentic relationship with followers to add legitimacy to hidden advertising posts. This is a fucking holy crap ball. Holy crap balls. This is so good. This is the ACCC. All right. Because, as I've said, like a lot of these things with, especially with political advertising, is where they make it look like news. They sort of prop up all of these people. Like, you know, I experienced that love bomb when I first started doing YouTube, where they sort of, you know, want you to talk about culture war shit or talk about what they want to talk about. And what they'll do is they'll throw money at you like a cam girl, and sort of, even if you don't necessarily, you know, like obviously anyone who's seen the Steven Crowder versus Ben Shapiro war that's going on at the moment sees that at that big end is big money, okay, for these creators. But what you don't understand is that they've also got unlimited resources underneath to give, you know, $100, $200 a month to pay, you know, like that's a lot. To a small creator like me, a fucking patron like that is huge. Okay, that is a big deal. And if you get 1 or 2 or 3 of those, that's enough to keep, you know, yeah, I would never do that. But like Matt pays me at the top tier, not the top tier, the second top tier. Thank you very much, Matt. I very much appreciate it, as does one other patron. And they've never made it conditional on me saying anything but what I want to say, okay? But there's a lot of people who would cave and see that if the Daily Wire gives you, you know, let's say they have, you know, 100 other influencers, and you know what I mean, they sort of love bomb you and invite you into their networks, and then they start sort of nudging you in the various directions without you even necessarily knowing it. They're just using your sort of all of your best qualities of trust and blind spots and good faith and respect for people who are giving you money and trying not to hurt them, and also, you know, trying to make it as a content creator. You can see that gap exists, and it's obvious. Look up Matt Binder's CV. Matt Binder has been someone who has been on the attack with Elon Musk. He's been on the attack with various other media players. The Majority Report prop him up. He does his own thing. He pops up at what you'll see these guys. They just pop up out of nowhere. They're suddenly on these shows. They're suddenly all friendly with these, like, this is on the left of like media, not even just the right wing, but they just suddenly are everywhere. They're suddenly on every podcast. They're suddenly, because they're actors. Okay? Matt Binder is not a fucking expert in crypto or online scams. I am. Okay? He's there to accuse everyone else of doing what he's part of. Okay? That's the whole MO. They hire these actors to do that. Anybody who has run any kind of micro-influencer campaign knows that this gap exists. The reason why I quit was because I realized, because I was sitting there I was saying, we need to plug this. We need to make sure, and no one would. They just wanted to exploit it. So the fact that this is now being clamped down on is a miracle, and I'm sorry, you have no idea how fucking elated I am about this. Now, obviously, given that most of these things are headquartered in the United States, then obviously we are still somewhat at the mercy of, you know, United States laws in terms of tech. But what you've got to understand is that with big tech, mostly good faith policy people who are trying to do good. They're not, again, I've explained this before, they're not necessary. They're not sitting there going, wah, ha, ha, ha. It's just that they don't have the tools or the mandate particularly to do this. So making this Elon Musk has said that he would honour local laws. So in Australia, Twitter is going to have to clamp down on these networks. And because those networks do come from the United States, where they're trying to nudge us into thinking we've fucking fallen and to fight for our rights when we are one of the most free, stable countries in the fucking world, okay, by every objective measure other than the Nordic countries, we are like smashing it, okay? Not always. There's still corruption, there's still problems, but for the most part, okay, we are, the global indexes, we're doing pretty well in terms of censorship and those sorts of things. So we become a gold standard. So what Australia does is that we will put upwards pressure on tech companies because operationally, these global tech companies, they need to make it, so this is what the GDPR did, was that because of the size of the market, the GDPR and by, a follow on from that, the Digital Services Act, that drags everyone else into, it lifts everyone else. So America's just sort of forced to go along with it, like with, despite their inability to like ratify any kind of like UN like resolutions that other than like enforcement of copyright and those sorts of things. But otherwise, anyway, I've digressed. So this is amazing news. So many consumers are aware that, where are we? So this can particularly apply to micro-influencers with small followings, as they can build and maintain a more seemingly authentic relationship, especially when they are connected to lots of other influencers. And so they sort of keep them and they have the overlap, and then they use that lookalike audience thing that I've talked about a lot, okay? And then what they do is they will launder those ideas up the chain to the big sort of, this is the Fox News model. This is what the Fox Network, it's what Daily Wire do really well. TYT, I've noticed the TYT Young Majority Report, that ecosystem does it. There's that sort of pro-democratic, these sort of independent large platforms that do this, okay? But then you've got other large creators who are sort of nudged somewhat without their consent. I would put Russell Brand and Jimmy Dore in those camps where they probably think that they're independent or whatever, but their audience is sort of radicalizing them. So you've got that audience capture, right? So that's an obvious thing. So cutting it off there and saying, okay, we want to see who's paying you and where it's coming from. But they have the ability to do that. So they can actually see if 10 influencers, right, have been reported, they now have access to that. So they can now see that there's these, the funding sources. Now, this is where we have to park some of the other problems, okay? We have to park the fact that there is room for corruption. But this is where this being multiple different departments probably helps, which is that, again, robo-debt was a disaster. There's a lot of fail points here. This stream would be 10 hours if I went into all the potential holes, but this is a step forward. So in theory, hypothetically, you are now under scrutiny as a digital agency for making sure that you're receiving money that's legit, you are not laundering sort of bad information, and you're not, using various like manipulative tactics to get people to buy your product, service, or idea. And but what you could do hypothetically is flag them for an audit of their finances. So if you don't want government auditors on your ass, you really don't. But what this does is sort of, tightens up that process, which is where I think you understand what I'm saying here, which is that a consumer complains that they've received this. That then warrants an investigation. That investigation, shows that there's, a few complaints and these actors seem to be related and linked somehow. They could actually refer that on to the ATO so that the financial fraud aspect is investigated as well. And so this is amazing. This is actually amazing for people like me. It's amazing for people like me because I don't take these things. I don't do these things. I won't engage in these practices. And I've been fighting these practices and I've been punished by these bots, these networks, all of these sort of things for years just for talking about these tactics, right? So it's really, really cool. So where are we? So the ACCC is therefore monitoring a mix of small and larger influencers in the sweep. This sweep follows a similar initiative carried out in 2022, which focused on identifying misleading online reviews and testimonials posted on businesses' websites, their social media pages and third-party review platforms. A report outlining the findings from 2022 will be published in the coming months. Online markets need to function well to support the modern economy. Part of that is ensuring consumers have the confidence they need to make more informed purchasing decisions. And by implication, like when you say purchasing decisions, they also, because this is the consumer commission, but also remember that this will probably trickle to political advertising as well, which I think is fantastic. So the ACCC will publish the findings of this sweep once the results have been analysed. And also with the news media, you've also got, so an audience is also a consumer because they are a consumer of the media. And so, again, they sit in gaps, but this is one big step towards closing those gaps. So, so each year, the ACCC announces a list of compliance and enforcement priorities. So they don't just do digital, it's just been a big part of it. They do just generalised competition, so anti-competition stuff, okay? Yeah, so anyway, it's the side point. So as part of the 2022-23 compliance and enforcement priorities, the ACCC is prioritising both consumer and fair trading issues in relation to issues, fair trading issues in relation to issues relating to manipulative or deceptive advertising and marketing practices in the digital economy. They're also conducting the Digital Platform Services Inquiry. So that's this, right? So the Digital Platform Services Inquiry. So the Australian government directed the ACCC to conduct an inquiry into markets for the supply of digital platform services. So the digital platform services covered by this direction include internet search engine services, social media services, online private messaging services, digital content aggregation platform services, media referral services, and electronic marketplace services. Now, what you need to understand with the ACCC is that their authority exists with companies who are that they're only able to regulate corporations under the Corporations Act. Okay, so you have to be a corporation in Australia. So they're going to talk about like small businesses and shit, but small business registration and those sorts of things are usually exempt because small businesses are state registered. Now, what will happen is I imagine the states will also take this under advisement and sort of, it'll go through consumer protection. So much like America and I think Canada as well, we've got we've got a federal system. So obviously this is the federal government, and then this is the under corporation. These are corporations that are big enough, under the jurisdiction of the federal government, okay? Most small businesses and most consumer protection, like warranties and consumer affairs and all of that sort of stuff, that is still mostly state. So like dodgy builders, licensing, regulate, all those little sort of micro regulations, those are at state level. So, they may come into conflict, but most of the time the ACCC sort of, trickles over, right? It's there's a balance between state and federal, right? Yeah, so small business is too small to meaningfully regulate. And also, I imagine the ACCC is not going to go after sort of individual influencers per se. I imagine that we're going to see a media campaign here, which is, let's predict what they're going to say, which is that they're cracking down on influencers making money so that big media can make money, so that big media can censor like independent voices. That's not what's happening. Most independent voices. For example, I'm an individual. You'd be surprised. And also, sorry, my mistake. So the corporations, I think that it depends on the nature of the crime. It really depends because you've also got your ABN and all that. It's other things. Anyway, but for the most part, there is an interaction between state, local, federal. Okay, so you've got local government that does the zoning and all that sort of stuff, and anyway. But for me, I'm a corporation. I'm registered as a proprietary limited company, mostly because of liability and those sorts of things. So, but I'm a sole director. Okay, so that will come after me because the way that my business is structured is as a proprietary limited company. So that's under the Corporations Act. If I was to register a small business name, that's a state government thing, and you pay, so it's different. There's a lot of overlaps and intricacies there between state and federal. So this is usually the law. Okay, let's just like put it there. So, okay, thanks. So, okay, so that you've got that that as well. So what they will probably say is that it's going to affect the little guy. Well, sole traders will not be affected largely by this. Usually sole traders are sort of a state thing, first of all. Second of all, I imagine the scrutiny is going to be mostly on those that are a registered corporation under the Corporations Act, because that's where the ACCC can only do like with a corporation, or that's why they can't really, that's another thing with the gaps with political advertising, is that political parties aren't corporations. Political parties are obviously a separate association, and that falls under a different legislative framework. So this is where all these gaps sort of need to be filled. But the narrative here is obviously going to be very clear. And you know, I just know how they're going to run with this, if they run with it at all. What I've actually found with these platform manipulation groups, okay, most of these media, independent YouTubers, you know, all those sort of people, independent, that I'm talking about, these media networks, is they just ignore it altogether, because they don't go accusing, like in the United States, if you're a Republican accusing, you know, the Democrats of doing this, you know, the Daily Wire are doing it too. MSNBC are doing it. CNN are doing it. You know, they're all, it's actually just that same set of tactics over and over again that everyone's using. That, and this is what I was saying before about dodgy practices. It's not so much about who's using it and who's doing it, because they all are. It's the fact that, you know, there's been no real big stick to be able to go, you know, I mean, any kind of dark pattern that tricks the users into doing anything is unethical, and that's why I quit, because I couldn't actually compete ethically, and that was the kind of thing that, anyway. So, so the scope of this inquiry was to include the intensity of competition in markets for the supply of digital platform services, with particular regard to the concentration of power, behaviour of suppliers, mergers and acquisitions, barriers to entry or expansion and changes in the range of services offered by suppliers of digital platform services. So the barriers to entry or expansion and changes in the range of services offered. So that's what I've been talking about before, where, you know, like a lot of this stuff isn't organic anymore. It's all pay to play. The barrier to entry for someone like me into this space, like, yes, I'm technically registered as a proprietary limited company, but, you know, it makes a loss. Like, I don't make any money from it. It's just there as a container for liability in case, you know, if something happens to me, right? But I don't actually make any real money. It's just, you know, sort of in name only and a little bit of cash. It's, you know, it's just one of those things. But the barrier to entry for me is phenomenal. You need to be able to, like, what I was going to do the Daily Wire thing. I might do that next week, because it's still kind of unfolding. But, you know, Stephen Crowder's got loose lips on this stuff. I mean, he's talking about how the Daily Wire, most of their traffic is bought, okay? So they basically, you know, buy ads, they amplify everything through their networks. A lot of it is artificial, a lot of it's bought. Very little of it is a real audience, and it's big money in it. And, like, the numbers don't add up. It's coming from, you know, it's obvious that this is the kind of thing that we need to clamp down on, okay, which is like, if you're, okay, so here's my dilemma. Here's another thing that they're going to try and probably spin in terms of narrative in order to fight this, which is that the way that it will force me, okay, and this is something that the GST did as well, like the goods and services, or VAT, or whatever you call it, okay, sales tax, is the compliance for me, right? So what I'm going to have to do is obviously be transparent about who my patrons are, who gives me money, and I have to open up my books. But I've been pushing for that for years. I want that to happen. But obviously the cost of compliance there with accounting is, you know, that's where it becomes a problem, because, you know, it's going to add some additional compliance burden on to small businesses, right? But I think that it's one of those things that is necessary, and I think that it's one of those things where it's in the public interest to know who is spending the most amount of money on Cats Against Trump on Facebook. I want to be able to know where that money came from and who spent it and why and when, and, you know, all of that sort of stuff. They need to be able to answer to that. Again, remembering this is if there's a complaint. This is one of those things where in Australia it's fine unless there's a complaint. It's fine unless there's a law. You know, so there needs to be a rule. There needs to be a reason. So my job that I want is to start complaining and reporting the people who, you know, I think are compromised, right? But I thought also you might find it really interesting, right? Let me just go back to this. So this is funny. So this is how Australians, so they create this digital platform services inquiry 2020 to 25. And so they basically, they have this brief, they have like they call for these new laws. It takes a long time. It's taken 5 years. So, it's taken years. But then they seek stakeholder views. Okay. So the way that the consultation process works is that they say, we're thinking of doing this. Okay. Let's get submissions. So every time that happens, they say, here's a discussion paper. Here's all of the issues. So this is how you really participate. When you say you're leaving the left, what does that mean? What does it mean? Okay. What are you doing? Are you doing this? I'm not doing this because it's not my job to do it yet. I want to. I'd like to make it my job. I just haven't been able to because there's no framework for me to do it. But you betcha I will be using my freedom of information and I'll be, a bit of a pest. So then they go, okay, so here's the submissions we received. Democracy in action. All open, all out in the open. So Alex, Afterpay, Amazon Australia supplementary paper. This independent. So again, individual people. I don't know. I think he's a consultant, actually, if I'm not mistaken. People have submitted the laws in other countries. Apple, okay, all of these places, okay, independent, corporate, they're all stakeholders in this place. They all have the right to submit papers, okay? And then what happens is they go, okay, well, we're thinking of this. Tell us what you think. And then the researchers, the policy people sort of read all of this, distill it, try to come up with something else. And they go, all right, well, we're thinking this. What do you think? You see how it works? But then what they do is that it takes years, but it's because it's constantly moving. They've had so many interim reports, right? So they've got, let's go back. So they've got ministerial direction. They've got the interim reports, okay? September 2020 interim report. They commission research. March 2021 interim report. September 2021 interim report, right? March 2022 interim report. And for each of those reports, right, they've got, here's what we think. This is where we're up to. Here's what we reckon. And then they go, issues paper. Okay, here's what we think the issue is. This is democracy in action. Australia hasn't fallen, dickhead. It's going, it's moving. Read stuff. But I'm sorry, yes, I'm sure that guy who has a take on Section 230 or how Australia's ACCC doesn't have mandate in Canada, I'm sure they've got a lot to say. I'm sure they do. The Asia Internet Coalition, who do they think they are telling Australia what to do? It's not how it works. They put so you've got all sorts of organisations, Business Council, catch.com.au, so Complementary Medicines Australia, Confidential Party. So that is, again, you have the option of doing this. Okay, which I haven't read these ones. I actually need to keep going through. I wish I could, here you go, find me funding so I can do this for my job and I'll make it happen, but I can't afford to. I wish I could spend more time, but this is how I spend a lot of my time, is keeping a track on this. eBay Australia, okay, retailers, Kogan have a lot to say about this, I'm sure. We'll follow it some other time, okay. New South Wales Small Business Commissioner have participated in this. So Pharmacy Guild. Okay, so because obviously this was the telecommunications industry ombudsman. Okay, Amazon Australia. They've had, reports, questionnaires, all sorts of stuff. They don't just, it's almost, what's funny? It's almost like YouTube is secondary. It's almost like content creators. Oh my God. Well, people did a YouTube video on this topic. It's like, no, this is how it works. Every single policy that goes through the Australian government operates mostly in this way. Okay, I want to read those confidential ones, but I'm just saying, this is really good news. So let me have a look at the, let me go back. You're an expert in watching YouTube vids on scams. It would be nice for political to be swept up, although the politicians love to carve those out of rules at times. Yeah, but a lot of it is also just the fact that it's stuck between departments. It's not a lack of goodwill. What I could do, so for me, I think with this, the angle that I'd be looking for is making sure that these advertising agencies are on the radar. So so that if they're doing, because if they're doing dodgy practices for a political party, they're doing dodgy practices in a commercial setting. So what you can do is, again, this is how the system works: is that you issue a complaint and go, okay, this is what I think's going on. And if they find something, they can refer on to another agency. So then eventually, over time, these things become, you can plug those gaps. So the problem is that it just takes years and years. Like, you've seen how long it's taken, and it's still going. Like, they've got a new interim report out next month. So, so it's small business, blah, blah, blah. Something about poo. Okay, good. Thanks. No. Okay. So where are we? Legit question. How does the Daily Wire pay for its subscribers? So they have, okay, so it's very complicated. There's a I'm going to break this out and do a proper video. This is why I have a private company, by the way, because I want to be able to explain these things without being sued I mean, not that I could give them anything anyway, but I'm just saying, it gives an extra layer of protection if I'm a publisher and a publishing company, that I'm doing media work, that they can't just arbitrarily, because they've got unlimited resources. They are funded by a lot of sort of the big oil billionaires, sort of your Koch brothers. The numbers don't add up. So the Daily Wire actually report about $100 million in revenue, and they say that they've got 25 full-time employees on staff. So that already doesn't add up when you factor in the fact that they're offering, $12.5 million a year to one of their creators, when they've actually got all these assets. So they've got, so that's the revenue that they report. And so it just doesn't add up, because, Jordan Peterson's a lot more famous than Stephen Crowder, so he's probably on a bigger, better deal. Candace Owens is, Ben Shapiro. They fund movies, podcasts. They have this entire infrastructure. I talked about this last time, but I am going to deep dive into this at some point. But Matt, they have, so they basically have a combination of things. So what they do is they actually, they game the system a little bit by paying for YouTube ads, and their videos, their short form videos run as YouTube ads. So then it counts as a view, and it is an ad of that video. It's they use the promoted system. They throw so much money at it. And then they it's hard to explain. But then also on Twitter, they do things like, so obviously they're always crying poor don't give them money, for fuck's sake. So that, when you think about all the patrons that they get, the persecution shit that they talk about, all this sort of fighting big tech, fundraising campaigns, the fact that they only report $100 million in revenue, it doesn't add up. So they first of all promote their videos everywhere. It's all boosted paid. So the Daily Wire is the number one media publication, but they're also number one, one of the number one advertising spend people. Okay, so they just, a lot of it is just sponsored content, and the click is the content. So the content, whether it's sponsored or not. Okay, so this is something with a small business person, when they're advertising on Facebook, I used to say, don't boost your ad. So they've got the boost button, if you know anything about that. I would say let the content do its organic reach first for maybe 2 or 3 days, because the second you boost that content, you have to pay for every click, because they don't differentiate. So the content, it's not an ad when it's boosted. It's still content that's an ad, but you get charged for organic, all traffic. The second you start paying for it, you get charged for all traffic. So the Daily Wire just boost everything and pay for everything. And basically, so as people interact and click and everything, they're just paying for it. They bankroll all of that. It's not, a lot of it isn't organic, right? And then once again, obviously, you see they get angry at culture wars shit. So then obviously people then interact with that platform, and, that machine sort of, self-fulfills, and so what they do on YouTube is that they do all of that stuff, but then they advertise their paywall content that is off-site. And what they do is they kind of sort of create this theatre and spectacle. They'll stage a ban. I've talked about them doing this before, but they'll stage a ban. I'm going to go into this on a separate video, but yeah, it's a whole thing. But yes, in short, it is a combination of these influencer campaigns. So, but they'll also, they'll probably, confidentially, I know a few people who have been offered nowhere near $50 million, but a substantial amount of money to join the family of that and join these groups. and start pushing their stuff. Okay, you're part of the family, so they just amplify, share each other's stuff. But this happens at the ground level, right? This is why you'll see, like if you watch YouTube as a consumer and you're not in the space, you might see that you find this YouTuber and then suddenly they just kind of get nudged. So they go in these two inevitable directions with the culture wars, because they end up like captured by these groups who are just, they offer to share your stuff. If you offer to share their stuff, it's like starts innocent, but then the stakes become higher. But then eventually, much like a cult, once you're in, you're fucking in, and they could turn on you the same way. And that's what happened to me with this stuff, with the algorithms, which was the second I started to see what they were doing and I started to talk about it, they put their bots on me. Right. So that's to mass report me and game the system and, all that sort of stuff. It's this is a whole, I actually do need to whiteboard this because it's very complicated, but it's, you have to be in the industry to sort of be able to see it. It's like I've said, it's magic eye painting where you sort of go, oh, I see what they're doing. But a lot of it does come from dark money. So they funnel it through these LLCs or proprietary limited companies or which are digital agencies or media companies. So the Daily Wire runs like a media company, and that's a black box. So what you've got is they provide services to other people. I imagine that they also offer their ad platform and they offer, all of these other services in the back end of, platform manipulation bots, like Matt Walsh's tweet where the view count was less than the likes. That was something that, again, they assholes clenched up. They ignored it, but it was, that's another smoking gun. So they use a bot script. So they just use it's very easy to write a Twitter bot. It takes ChatGPT can generate a Twitter bot in 5 seconds now, but usually it would have taken you about a couple of hours to do a basic one, a few days to implement one that works at scale. So what they do is they would use something like the Twitter API, or they use these tools to, mass report. So they just do mass report bots, they're scripts. Yeah. It's business interests, billionaires, like oil billionaires. If you see Jordan Peterson talking about oil or Tucker Carlson and the gas stoves and shit, it's coming that's just propaganda, that they're obviously getting money from those interests, right? Jesus bot was great. Remember when we've seen these live on my streams with, this is another reason, BioThreat, this is another reason why I set boundaries with chatters, is because I've had bots show up in my chat that are trying to sort of, they just show up and abuse you and, try to nudge you. And it's just like, well, if you're a human and I say, please stop, most people will go, oh, I'm sorry, like you didn't self-correct, unless you're an internet dickhead, and then I don't want an internet dickhead. But sometimes it's actually a bot, right? An AI, right? That's trying to, I think you'd be surprised how sophisticated these things are. Basically, they write blank checks. It's a blank check. They give them, like Turning Point USA, the amount of money that they get is insane. And basically they just have a Twitter scripts and Twitter bots. They buy so with Twitter and the tech platforms, what they do is this is where the conflict of interest lies, which is because they spend so much money in advertising as well, they're also a customer of the tech companies. They're a big client. They can't afford to piss them off. And so they give them access to enterprise grade API tools. They let these bots run rampant. They turn a blind eye because they make money from it. So maybe look at my previous stream. I've done a couple on this, but the next one is where I'm going to dive into the Daily Wire. I need to actually grab the clips from that, where he's sort of accidentally confessed a bunch of like the stuff that I've been talking about. But I need to just pull that stuff together. I just don't have time. So Jesus bot was a bot, that an AI driven chat bot that it said basically come to do XYZ and come to Jesus and some personal information about me. And then I was like, oh, go away, bot. And then it goes, your husband's name is Paul. And I was like, and then it was funny because then my chatters started to break it, but it showed up in my Discord. My chatters broke it. And it was just very funny. They were all chatting at this bot and it was pretending to be, it was really amazing. And so everyone decided to start confusing this AI, and it just broke and snapped and started doing all sorts of things. Again, you just got to be able to see these things, okay? The bots, they're basically chat bots. If you've seen Chat GPT, that's been going on for years with things like Watson and these chat bots. It's just Chat GPT is the most famous version at the moment. But anyway, I'll talk about that some other time. It was just a moment. Jesus Bot was funny because they just used to show up on the chat and tell me to convert to Jesus Christ and, you know, all these things. But I've had various versions of that. The anti-vax bots were interesting because they would actually start arguing with you. So you could tell that they were doing detection and they were like getting smart. But again, you break them and then it just goes and just turns on abusive mode. It just starts doing this. It's very funny. Like, if you know what you're doing, it's very funny to do. Time before Hitler, exactly. Time before Hitler, exactly. It's amazing. It's quite amazing. I wouldn't mind actually doing more work in that space because it's fascinating, right? Anyway, but I think maybe legal for me. I don't know. Legal policy work is where I like doing stuff, but whatever. Anyway, this is good news because I actually thought that I'd have to become a psychologist and do therapeutic work because I didn't think anyone was going to change it and that this is what the internet was going to look like. With this news, what I'm seeing is that there is actually political will there, and that's what you need. So for change to occur in these business settings, I was sort of feeling hopeless. I felt like there was no real political will to address this issue. Now there is, and that's a good sign. So that means that, you know, I can recalibrate my strategy and what I want to do. And it's like, well, maybe it's not palliative. Maybe we can actually turn a corner with the internet and it's not over. And as long as the tech companies sort of don't fight this too hard. I talked about this yesterday where I think Facebook's going to be the one that struggles the most here because obviously, Twitter is going to have a problem. Actually, they're all going to have a problem because a lot of this is around influencer campaigns. YouTube's going to struggle. Rumble definitely going to struggle because they sort of interesting times. Anyway, I know there's just so much here. I'd like to answer all your questions. I really would, but it's just a lot of history. So I need to break it into smaller streams. So where are we? So somebody pointed out to politicians exactly how influencers could pose a threat to politics. Well, yeah. So that's what I said this morning, and YouTube guys, don't come after me for saying this. I'm not monetized anyway. Just don't. But whatever. Which is that I said I'm kind of glad in a way that COVID happened because a lot of this stuff I spotted back in sort of 2017, 2018, that this asterisk. So again, I received this love bomb. Okay, if you've started a YouTube channel and you talk about anything sort of political and you do political commentary, you've probably been approached or, you know, love bombed at some point by some group here. It's just what they do is they sort of they see fresh meat and they sort of go for it, right? And I started to get that traction, and then all of a sudden flatline, dead, absolutely fucking dead. Now I've grown, because basically what happened was. All of the fake accounts. They were putting fake accounts to follow me, subscribe, all that stuff, right? One broke at one point where there were more likes than views, and that was weird. And I was like, what the fuck's going on? This is, again, I've seen these things. It's happened to my account because their scripts break, okay, sometimes, and I just pay attention to the numbers and I go, oh, okay. So that's just something that, bought followers, bought likes, bought views, all that sort of stuff. But then they will turn on you and they will report you in the same way in the hundreds and thousands, right, for whatever. And what they'll do is they'll just report every tweet in your account. And then the way that they game the algorithm with something like Twitter is that they report all of your tweets. And if they find anything that's in breach, then you get a ban. I've had that happen a couple of times where, a joke from 2017 or 2018 got me a 12-hour suspension in 2020 or 2021 or gave me a strike or whatever. So I knew that this was going on because it was a thing from 2018. So they were just going through and trying to find rule-breaking tweets to get you banned from the platform. So Rumble will struggle because it's full of all of the people that manipulate the platforms. Peter Thiel is one of those people that, that sort of shuffles dark money. So those interests are, who knows? I'm just saying it's interesting. Okay, I should be more cautious about what I claim, especially if I can't spend an hour explaining why. Just assume that I know what I'm talking about. This is just my assessment, my gut assessment, which is that platforms that have been reliant on fake followers, fake likes, these pods. So they're called pods, engagement pods. Okay, so they're not fake accounts. They're real people who want to boost their engagement and numbers, and they go into these groups and they like and subscribe, and they comment on each other's things, boost each other, have each other on their podcast. They have each other on their thing, and once you're in that, then obviously they can oust you with the same resources, right? So it's just one of those things where you're kind of stuck. I just back out slowly, and again, I've been covering this a lot, so I would like to try and again, you can't cover too many things. This is too complex to cover in a single stream, and it's just it's too much. It's a lot to, but anyway, I've got to fix my voice too. Apologies. Hang on, let me drink. No cock in my throat. Okay. So anyone who's sort of relying on any influencer who has taken this money and they're in Australia, and I imagine it will be Canada, definitely Europe. Okay, that's going to happen in Europe, and that will probably put upward pressure on tech companies to conform to that standard across the board, because it's just more economical for them to just do the right. So that's one of the upsides of a global corporation, is that they're kind of forced to be lifted upwards in terms of policy, because having so many different terms of service that are different rules for different places, they have to recalibrate every algorithm in every country. It just becomes resource intensive. So it's more, again, this is the Adam Smith's invisible hand at work, which is through the markets in this instance. Okay, they will accidentally do the right thing because it'll cost them less to just make it to use fewer resources. So this is how it really should work. Okay, it's not really the invisible hand as such, but it's similar, which is that companies can accidentally do the right thing sometimes because it's more economical for them to do the right thing than the wrong thing. That's sort of the rationale. That's the pure good argument, pro-capitalist argument. Okay, obviously the fact that fuckwits and crooks exist, and that you need everyone to be good faith and not doing dodgy things, gives capitalism a major flaw, and that's Marx's critique of it, which is that throughout time fuckwits have existed and exploited others, and that's what Marxist analysis of capitalism is. But the way that good purist form of capitalism works is that it's more costly to do the wrong thing. Regulation makes it a lot more expensive for them to it's basically, this will make it more expensive. If there's enough, sometimes a lot more regulation and laws in a country, it's like say levels of government. For a corporation, it has the effect of making it more costly, because it's more complex. Compliance, risk, all those things, lots of failure points, failures of process, because you need a process for compliance for every single thing. It's better off. So it's better if they just lift it upwards to comply with Australian law, right? Look, here we go. Congratulations. So I'll look forward to the day that influencers have to give disclaimers that are longer than the ad, like medical ads over here. Yeah, and the thing is that, that's just, that blows my mind that pharma can do that. But America, the one thing about it, I was thinking about this with the pharma argument, right, with all the stuff that's coming out at the moment about Pfizer sort of trying to silence people who are calling for open source patents, right, for the COVID vaccine. I was thinking about, and like the price of insulin, and there is an argument, there is a case to be made that these things are cheaper with the rest of the world because they recoup their costs in America. There is that argument there whereby, America has a net good because they're so, so backwards and experimental, and, that they kind of offset the costs for the rest of us. Much like having, cracking the American market, or cracking an American viewership, or cracking anything, getting an American audience. There's so many that it becomes instantly more viable as a business. And I don't want to race to the bottom with American content. Otherwise, but they don't like us. What about your accent? It's like, okay, would you like to listen to what I've got to say? But by charging Americans like so much for insulin, their margins are sort of, I know that's a backwards kind of argument. I'm being generous, but I'm saying, there's complexity and layers to these arguments. It's not either or, right? It's not that strange as a business needing customers who will pay. No, it's not that strange. It's just that business interests and profit are at odds with the best interests of people. I think the thing that we've been sold is that, this win-win-win capitalism idea, this conscious capitalism. It's like, well, no, this is not what it is. Nobody is disputing that. I think this is the big straw man. I think that, a lot of these, America particularly, but, American culture warriors on the right, not the right, the culture warriors on the right, they straw man these left-wing perspectives, which is that, yes, there's a whole bunch of assumptions and premises that you've got to accept for this idealized version of the free market to exist. They ignore the fact, and this is another thing that was funny about Stephen Crowder's sort of objection to the Daily Wires contract, which is that, because of a power imbalance, contracts can be exploitative. Like that's the socialist argument, okay? And only the most batshit tanky person who doesn't know anything, doesn't actually know anything about socialism, argues that the free market as an ideal isn't perfect. Even Marx loved the market. He just loved that. He also knew that it had failure points and that there were flaws in it, and that one of those things was that the assumption is that people aren't going to game the system. There isn't going to be an imbalance between those with capital and those without, and that creates a whole problem that we still continue to see. And that's why the war on capitalism is so the war on socialism is so vicious in the United States, because it is really not that complicated. And socialists, any reasonable socialist, right, understands that even that capitalism, literally the word capitalism came out of socialism. It was a term coined by socialist critique to critique the market, which is that socialism and capitalism under a free market, that we both want a free market, we just disagree on what that free market looks like, and disagree on, the underlying human flaws and human nature that underpins a lot of this stuff. Like there's nothing more utopian than pure capitalism, because it assumes that everyone does the right thing. It assumes that everyone, are good actors. It assumes that everyone is good faith, and that people don't want to seek power or exploit others or profit or, all of those other things. That's all it was. And so the socialist, argument is that these things are real, they exist, and you need to regulate so that they don't do that. No one's denying the free market. Commies are idiots. Just ignore that. Like they're as literate about socialism as any fucking, what are they called? Voluntarist people, those anarcho-capitalists. They're retarded. They're stupid. They don't work. It doesn't make sense. Okay, that's all. Nothing threatening there. So where are we? So let's be honest. Most of the world's defence is fully subsidised by the USA. This is why European countries can afford to subsidise and have cheaper meds and other social programs. Well, no, not really. They're separate. They're actually separate things. So meds are not the military. Yes, you've got an industrial complex there, but I think we've got to be more specific. But yes, I was being glib, but I was actually making a point, which is that pharma, if they didn't charge what they charged in the United States, then they would make a lot less profit, which means that they would up the prices elsewhere in the world. Like, that's true, but that doesn't. Yeah, and you're not incorrect. But I think maybe we're crossing wires in the fact that the US military is its own. It's not the world's defense. Okay, a lot of these things are unnecessary and predatory, and and imperialist in nature. And America has, as a country who is, when you're joking, referred to as the 51st state, because we've got military bases here. The United States have actually there's some evidence. My lawyers have told me to say no. There is some evidence, John Pilger wrote about it, that the Whitlam dismissal in 1975 was actually a CIA coup, that they actually, because he told the American military that they didn't want military bases, so they got rid of our prime minister. That's a known MO. That's a thing. Again, it's not related, but I just wanted to unpack that. It's not defense. This is attack. Okay, this is imperialism. Okay, yeah. In order to accept the premise that there's some sort of defense, okay, implies that there's a threat, and there aren't any major threats. Okay, anyway, that's a whole other thing. I'm not going to get into that because that's again, this is just what the culture wars does. This is what political analysts on YouTube do, which is that they oversimplify these things and lump everything in together and argue with this giant straw man that just doesn't exist. And you've got to unpack it, and it's complicated. Like you saw, how many papers and submissions there are just on different stakeholders, and how the job of policy is very, very tricky, right? So the USA very much defends most of the world. No, it doesn't. Okay, that's empirically not true. Okay, you got America brain. No. Team America World Police is an underrated movie. It so is. It's also hilarious. That overextended puppet sex scene is but it is. It's that is the US. You got America brain. Yeah, nah. It's just not. That's not true at all. America is the aggressor, the instigator, and the main profiteer, instigator, and beneficiary for most of these things. US unregulated. Global corporations are well and truly. You live in an oligarchy. You've been told something. You've been told. You basically, when I hear someone, I don't know whether you're American. Let's just assume you are. Okay. I hope you are, because if you're not American, then that's even dumber. But you are spitting out something that is basically, you live in the other side of North Korea. In terms of you live in a bubble, you think that you've been told that you're free, and you're not. You've been given a lot of selective information. You do not, and that was a big part of my research, was realizing that America speaks a different language, even though they speak English, even though we are largely informed about American politics and those sorts of things. Their definitions of things are vastly different. Everything, what's up is down. Everything's upside down. Everything's topsy-turvy. Okay. That was the thing where they're saying things about Marxism, and I'm like, that's benign. What are you talking about? And it's just that. It's that very powerful propaganda machine. It's called the military-industrial complex. Okay. Okay, so thanks, Biothreat, for joining me, and I thank you for self-correcting. I very much appreciate it, and it's remembered, so thank you. So there is a threat. Ukraine wants to... Oh, here we go. No, okay. Here we go. So at the beginning of my stream, I said don't argue with creators while they're talking about complex issues, because they can't engage on it. I engage in good faith. You get maybe one chance to self-correct. I'm giving you a chance to self-correct and not heckle and argue, because what you're saying is not true, and I would encourage you to learn more. This is not a matter of opinion. It's not up for debate, okay? You don't know what you're talking about. I know that as an American, I imagine you're an American or a heavily propagandized person who consumes an awful lot of American right-wing media, that you think that your opinion is equal to my lifetime, my career of research and facts and looking at the evidence. But unfortunately, I don't actually care about your opinion. Okay, your opinion is your opinion, and have it, go for it. But it's not what you're saying. I'm telling you is objectively, empirically false. Okay. So it's not silly, and I'm just going to ignore from now on. So I'll give you a chance to be nice, and if you're not nice in the next chat, then I'll, that's this. Okay. So what do you think would happen if the USA military disappeared? I think the world would be happy. I'm not saying you've been mean. I'm saying you're being a dickhead. So I'm not going to argue with chatters. This makes it unpleasant for everyone else who's watching, for watching me engage with someone like this. No, well, you don't seem to understand what words mean. So he said, lol, isn't that the same thing? Mean and being a dickhead. No, being a dickhead, you're being disrespectful. You're not respecting the boundaries of the stream. You are coming in and you are arguing with somebody who's talking about complex geopolitical issues with, who has more training than you. You're saying lies in my chat. And then you're heckling and you're saying, I'm not going to argue with a chatter, but you're actually entering a thing with no consideration for others who might find this tedious. And so it's not mean. Americans seem to very confused about what words mean lately. And mean does not mean you're being a dickhead. I'm an Australian. Being a dickhead is a term of endearment, but it also names behaviour. You're not being mean. I think you're being stupid. And they're different things. And I'm informing you that you are being stupid. What you are saying is wrong. And I'm encouraging you to read further rather than try to heckle me on my stream when I'm just trying to do my own thing. Like I said, just because it's there doesn't mean you have to say anything. Just because someone's talking doesn't mean you have to argue. You can just read the room. Okay. So you haven't even explained. I don't need to explain. This is the thing you don't understand. This is where the confusion lies. And I know you're on Twitch, so I imagine your social skills aren't strong to begin with. But I don't actually need to explain because I have the wealth of knowledge and research and institutional knowledge and generational knowledge and my discipline and all these things and facts behind me. You're making a ridiculous claim based in falsehoods that is not true outside of a media landscape that is, rotting your brain. You're making a claim that's false. It's on you to prove that it is true, okay? Which we know it isn't. Okay, well, my stream is useless. It is. Thank you. I tried. This is what I deal with every day. You've got a live one, everyone. Well, oh, yay! That's okay. It's good. It's a teachable moment for others. I like teaching people on digital civics and how to behave and conduct themselves. It would appear that I am no longer algorithmically suppressed on Twitter because I think I posted on Twitter. But that's good. That's a good thing. I'm happy with that. That's excellent. It's a good sign because normally we haven't had people, wandering in, so that's good. So how do they know if there's a bot attack? There's lots of different ways to detect that stuff, but it's if you were looking at the Twitter files with Barry Weiss, she posted, there's a few of these signals, right? Usually it will look unusual. So like you'd have a spike of traffic or a spike. So like for me, the thing that made me realize there was a bot attack, it was the fact that I knew what I've always known, again, I'm a campaigner, right? I've been online forever. I know what my numbers look like. I know what portion, I know what my conversion is. I know when I'd say something, roughly how many people will watch, roughly how many people will interact, what the engagement looks like, okay? Over time, you sort of start to understand that, these things sort of operate in a certain way. So the way that I know that I was, well, this is how, you're shadow banned because you just sort of drop off. So my followers haven't grown at all, like in forever, okay? I nothing, no organic growth. So that's one. But then on Twitter and Facebook side, they sort of look for lots of things like whether you've got a picture, whether you've got a website, whether it's got a phone number attached, whether you've got a bio, whether they think you're a person, all of these other things, but also in terms of the behavior. So if you suddenly have a tweet that suddenly gets likes in a short amount of time, that would indicate that maybe there's some inauthentic behavior going on. And that's why the Daily Wire, and that's why with Matt Walsh's tweet, what they'll do is they boost it with a few thousand likes, but they do it over the course. So you can rate limit these things. So you can just have it so that a bot is sort of, using these networks of accounts, right? And they just kind of like them over a 24-hour period. Now, the API, the Twitter API, for example, like that rate limits that. I think it's about 400 per hour or something that's really ridiculously low. But the Daily Wire have an enterprise API account. So when you give Twitter X amount of money, you get better access to more things. The one thing they didn't count on is that people like me would see the view count being open and exposed. And you could see that Matt Walsh had I think it was like 6,000 views and 8,500 likes on his tweet. What that shows is that something is liking the tweet without viewing the tweet via, the app or the website or bypassing those scripts somehow. How to stop them? It's whack-a-mole, okay? Because obviously you can now AI can spin a profile picture, AI can spin a bio, ChatGPT, DALL-E could actually just spin an infinite number of Twitter accounts and then just keep doing it, infinitely, right? So not if you're, so exactly. So not, that's it. But I also kind of go, I don't know how I feel about that either, because some of it is plugging holes. I don't know how to solve these problems. Again, I wish I was more on the inside. Because from the outside, there's a charitable way to look at it and an uncharitable way to look at it. And I don't know. I don't know whether it's anti-competitive, which I think it's actually because they're trying to lock down the API for some of these things. I have to assume that people are doing the right thing as best they can, right? I just have to assume that. I have a healthy grain of skepticism about it, but that was I think if Musk was wanting to protect these media outfits that operate in these ways, he wouldn't have opened up the view count. I think that was a bit of fuckery to show what goes on. Eagle Eyes noticed. Nobody reported on it, but that was funny to me that he was willing to do that, because that's another. There's lots of different aspects to this that I go, well, I'm not an insider, so I don't know. I'd love to know. I wish I did, but I don't. Reduction in data center costs would be favourite. Well, yeah, there's that too, which is that, if you want to, well, that's the thing. I mean, I think the API access, I think that there should be a free API access, but, it is expensive to run, as you know. It's, it's a tricky one. It's a tricky one between access and I don't envy the position. I wonder. This is why this new Twitter CEO. It'd be interesting to see. I hope. I err on the side of Musk thinking he knows what the solution is and accidentally stumbling. I think he accidentally stumbles on the right solutions, because the right solutions are probably the most profitable, right? In this sense, which is that relying on brands to manipulate media, that's closing in. The ad fraud shit is closing in at knots, right? I can talk about that separately. So it's only because I think because regulators are closing in on multiple different angles, it's in his interests right now to try and appeal to sort of small business, small creators, people who actually genuinely want to give money rather than large-scale click fraud, right? So it's in his interest to get rid of the bots because, again, I think a lot of the tech companies are also just cleaning house with a lot of this stuff where the jig's up. The jig's up. It's over. I wish that I wish I had more of a say in what was going on with Twitter product, but I hit pause. I'm on the fence. I'm just going to wait and see. That's all we can do. So anyway, I think it's a good time. I think it's a good time for, it's closing in. It's going to be interesting to see if anyone sort of spins this as attack on small business when it's actually just attack on the very thing that I've been reporting on for the last few years. Reporting. I said to Paul this morning, I was like, have I been an accidental journalist this whole time? Please tell me no. But if the thing is, if there ends up being a level playing field that's like actual grass, not AstroTurf, then, I may consider doing it. But as it stood, up until recently, calling yourself a journalist is the worst thing you could do. It's but maybe this is maybe self-correcting. I hope it is. So let's just, let's keep watching. But I think what's going to be interesting, is how far this extends to pharmaceutical companies, how much this extends to political advertising, and all of those sorts of issues. So anyway, I'm going to go. I've been 2 hours. That's too long, but that's okay. Become a patron if you want. If you want me to, do more of this stuff. I can only do as much as I can afford to do, but, it is how it is. My computer seems to have held up today. Tell me if it hasn't, but I think it has. Thank goodness. But either way, I've taken a record back up anyway. I'm going to try and do some clips, but editing, just rendering on my machine. My God. Anyway, do the best I can. So I love you. Thank you for your precious life seconds. Things are good. I'm feeling like this is between some of this. I'm going to start zooming in a bit more closely on some of this ad tech stuff and ad policy stuff and tech, because I think it's, if you've been watching me, you see where it's been building to. It would be nice if the algorithms were friendlier to me. It seems, because I got some stragglers in today. So getting stragglers is a good sign that maybe I've actually got a chance again. Maybe. Let's see how we go. Looks like YouTube actually showed that I was streaming. So let's see how we go. I love you. Thanks for watching. Producer Matt, thank you as always. Producer Matt's going to be a guest on my new podcast. It's called User Story Hour, and it will be stories with everyday people, individual people, about how the internet works with them and their life, and telling some stories, a little bit of nostalgia, and coming up with maybe some solutions. So it's a good time to be doing User Story, and the User Story Hour is a play on the Drag Queen Story Hour. To piss people off because it's funny, but yeah, User Story Hour. Okay, and user stories in user experience are something that you do when you're designing a tech product. You write, you do user stories. So I love you. Take care. I shall be back probably early next week. I'm trying to do more regularly, but now that my tech's fixed and stuff, I should be okay. But anyway, so it's all good. Love you. Be well. Behave. Bye. Let's hope that my button works this time. If it doesn't, then I'll make it awkward